Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We have come to the fifth and last session of this series on fundamentals of Vedanta. Today we will be discussing the actual process of desuperimposition, which is generating the right knowledge in order to get rid of the error of ignorance, the adhyas. So desuperimposition actually means you are removing the superimposition which you have created, removing the error in your buddhi. So if ignorance is of the nature of an error, obviously knowledge must be the antidote to that, isn't it? So vichar, inquiry, leading to pure knowledge, that is the way of Vedanta. Through vichar alone one can overcome this completely, the great huge problem of ignorance, which is the cause for all other problems. So if you actually see the life of great realized masters, you will see the importance they have given to this. In the life of Sri Ramakrishna, you find this beautiful incident. Once Narendranath comes to him, and Narendranath is the future Vivekanand. And as a young boy, college boy, he would come to Sri Ramakrishna. And once when they were conversing, Narendranath said, "You actually cannot know Brahman because tini avang manasagochar. He is beyond speech, he is beyond mind. So you actually cannot know Brahman." Then Sri Ramakrishna suddenly says, "Na, take jana jai. You can know him." How do you know him? And then Sri Ramakrishna gives the method. He says, you can know him through the pure mind. If the mind is completely clarified and uncluttered, it will intuit the presence of pure consciousness. Nothing more is required. The pure mind. Then Sri Ramakrishna gives this wonderful formula, how exactly it is done. He says, the pure mind is equal to the pure buddhi, which is equal to the pure Atman. The pure mind will resolve into the pure buddhi, and the pure buddhi will resolve into the very nature of reality. Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you use the thorn of knowledge to remove the thorn of ignorance and throw away both. You merge into pure being. So, it is possible to do this through vichar. In fact, that is the method recommended by Vedanta. Only thing is, a very well-developed, refined mind is required to do this. Otherwise, you use a meditation technique or a process to usher you into that state of refinement where you can directly intuit truth. So there have been exceptional minds in the various cultures of the world who have been able to intuit reality without even the aid of a scripture. In fact, you see, the sense of I am, which we all feel, it does not require the confirmation of any scripture to tell you that you are, isn't it? Nobody asks, am I or am I not? You always are. The I am is the essential expression of your existence. So this is nothing but an inquiry, a penetration into that existence. It is to be done by oneself. Nobody can do it for us. If it is done to its very depths, it will result in self-knowledge. Raman Maharshi used to say, I had never even heard of the words Atman and Brahman. Much later after his realization, when he heard this being spoken of as words of the scriptures, he felt that, oh, they are talking about my experience. So these will remain words without the inner mystical contact with our own true being. So it is entirely an experience-based, you can say, knowledge. It is entirely being and becoming. And those who get it don't require anything else for it. If we don't get it just through vichar, apply a technique. use a meditation process. There are so many techniques. There is the whole science of yoga, which is, you can say, it is the technology of consciousness. It is a progressive means to attain the goal of Vedanta. It provides you with that progressive means. And there are 4 types of yogas which Vivekananda recommended to be practiced by people according to their inclinations, according to their faculties, in order to reach the truth of the self. He classified these as Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga. Please watch this slide. When you use a progressive path to move towards Vedanta, we usually adopt any one of these yogas and use them as means to realize the truth of Vedanta. Vivekananda sums it up beautifully. He says, each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest that divinity within. Do this either by work, worship, psychic control, philosophy, by one or all of these, and reach the goal. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines, dogmas, books, temples, churches, bells, all these are secondary details. So there are well-developed means to reach the goal of Brahman. And some of these means are scattered in the Upanishads themselves. They are also available as meditation techniques. Usually in Vedanta, in Advaita Vedanta, there are 2 schools describing these methods. The first school is what is called Vivarana, and the second is the Vachaspati or Bhamati school. So Vivarana school lays great stress on hearing, Shravan, as a means to Vedantic realization, realizing the truth of Vedanta. And the Vachaspati school or the Bhamati school lays great stress on meditation as a means, Nididhyasana as a means to realize the supreme truth. So use any of these methods in a very right mind. Just the hearing of the truth will suffice to take one into the truth. And this is perfectly possible if the mind is of that type. It is called Shabda Aparoksh. Just dwelling, when the Guru speaks the Mahavakyas, the mind of the disciple immediately reaches or touches the truth which the Mahavakya is speaking of. So this is a possibility, and it can happen in a very ripe mind. And for people who are not of that extreme quality, there is always a path, a means towards that through a meditation technique. Even the purpose of meditation is only to enter into the state of pure being, whether it is a subjective meditation or objective meditation. The purpose is only that. You can only know reality when you enter into it. There is no other way. Now, suppose I am standing on the beach, and you ask me, how is the ocean? So I will give you a nice description of the ocean. Oh, there are waves, there is foam, a lot of water stretching out to the horizon. I will give this kind of a description of the ocean. But if I enter the water, I will give you a totally different description of the ocean. I will say the ocean is cold, it's warm, and this is how it feels. So when you enter the ocean, you get a different description. You get a totally different understanding, experience. These are states to be entered into. You can't stand on the beach and describe them. You can't take up a scripture and describe this state. It is only through the practice of meditation or vichar that one can actually enter into the state of pure being. Until then, one can have no idea of it, actually speaking. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Brahma ekmatra uchishta haini. It's the only thing which has not been contaminated by the tongue. It has never been described. It cannot be described because it is behind the faculty of speech, behind the mind. How will the mind or the speech describe it? Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha. The mind and speech can never touch it. In the Kenopanishad, there is such a beautiful description of the nature of self-knowledge. The very primary questions, Kena Upanishad begins like this. Keneshitam patati preshitam manaha, kena prana prathama praiti yuktaha, keneshitam vachamimam vadanti, chakshu shrotra kahudeo yunakti. What is it that impels the mind to perform its function? What is it that impels the prana to perform its function? What is it that makes our eyes and ears sense objects? What is that impelling factor? What is that inner force, inner dimension? And the answer given is, it is Shrotrasya Shrotram, Manaso Manoyat Vachoha Vacham Sau Pranasya Pranaha, Chakshuscha Chakshu, Atimucha Dhira. It means to say it is the eye of the eye, it is the ear of the ear, it is the mind of the mind. What a beautiful description. Consciousness is that which enlivens the mind so as to enable the sense organs to perform their function. The self is that which illumines your whole being and makes the mind and body conscious so that you perceive this world of objects. So the only way to know it is to turn this entire equipment inward and intuit it through pure understanding. And this is the path recommended by Vedanta. All meditation techniques, whether yogic or Vedantic, all of them actually enhance awareness, which means from the standpoint of the mind, they are decluttering your mind. Awareness is always there. When you remove the nonsense in the mind, the awareness shines forth. So it appears like awareness is being revealed from the standpoint of the mind. So this is how meditation also enhances awareness. Actually, in meditation, what are we training? Think and see. You are training your attention. Attention itself is nothing but a beam of your awareness guided by your will. So when you fix attention, you are unfolding the highest awareness. Naturally, that is why meditation is used as a means to self-knowledge. So no matter what technique of meditation or vichar you use, you will arrive at the same point. You will arrive at the state of being the self. Here, knowing is by being. I would like to discuss one technique here, which is commonly called Avasthatraya Vichara, which I introduced it to you in the first session, I think. So this will help us understand the nature of Turiya, the nature of the self. All of us universally pass through 3 states of everyday experience. With just this much data, the rishis are going to give us some very profound understanding. This is the subject matter of the Mandukya Upanishad. And it is very important. This alone is sufficient if we have a very ripe mind. Mandukya eva alam, they say. This alone is enough. Because you see, it is pointing to something very deep within us. All of us pass through the states of waking, dream and deep sleep. In the waking state, your senses are in full bloom, your mind is in full bloom, taking in the impressions of objects. The waking self is called, they have given him a different name. He is called the Vishwa, the waker, let's call him. The dreamer is called Tejasa. So Tejomayatva Tejasa, because you light up your dream. In your dream, the senses are closed, but the mind is functioning. And the subconscious mind especially, it creates your dream, it spins a dream, and it is involved in the dream completely. You don't realize it's a dream until you wake up. See, this is the beauty of Tejasa. Completely it is invested in the dream. And you alone light up your dream. You see, the light in your dream is the light of awareness. You are not using any other light. In your awareness, you are spinning objects and identifying completely with them. So this is the second state which we experience. The third is what is called Sushupti, deep sleep. So the deep sleeper is called Prajna in Vedanta. What is his experience? The senses are shut in deep sleep, the mind is also shut in deep sleep. And yet you have an experience of deep restfulness and of a gladness, a happiness you can't do without deep sleep. So the actual Sanskrit given in the Upanishad is Sukham aham asvapsam na kinchit vedesham, which means I slept happily and I did not know a thing. I slept like a log. So who experienced this? If the senses were shut, the mind was shut, how did you get this experience? It's an experience of absence of objects. It is not an absence of experience, which means you were there to experience. Consciousness is the common factor for all these three states. It is the underlying, you can say, invariable of these three variable states of Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti. So you can just know it to the extent awareness is cultivated. This will appear even more obvious. Otherwise, it will appear inferential, especially the state of Sushupti, that you're making an inference here. No, it is an experience of absence which you tracked and which you can talk about and which you can't do without. So you were very much there. Who was there? That is the reality of consciousness. It is called the Turiya, the fourth one, because not that it is another fourth state, but it is the self that underlies these three states. You are ever that. And the waker, dreamer and deep sleeper are different formulations of you passing over you. You are that substratum of consciousness which spins this entire thing. So Avastha Traya Vichara is tracking the invariable in all variables. It is the common denominator in all your experiences. And that is why the yukti, there is a kind of logic applied here. Anvaya Vyatireki Yukti it is called. It is actually catching the unchanging, the invariable amongst variables. So Avasthatraya Vichara is, if you do it in a very alert state of mind and experientially, it will lead to self-knowledge. It is directly pointing to the real nature of Turiya, the self. There is only one immutable substratum to all our experiences, the Atman, and that can be caught in various ways. Another beautiful way described is the story of Shvetaketu in the Chandogya Upanishad. I will briefly go into this. In the Chandogya Upanishad, we have the story of a young boy called Shvetaketu who was sent to another rishi by his father. So the father was very keen that, the father's name was Uddalak, and he was very keen that Shvetaketu becomes a very learned man. So he goes for his education and he comes back after 12 years. But the father is pained to see now Shvetaketu has some pride. He's a little egoistic. So Vidya Dadati Vinayam, the pride should not be there. So he takes his son to a particular place where there is a lot of clay around. And he tells his son, look my son, you have known a whole list of subjects you have studied for long years. But have you known that one, knowing which one knows everything else? Just as knowing this lump of clay, I can know everything that this clay can become, everything that is made up of clay, I can know everything about that. So also, do you know that one substance, knowing which you can know everything in this world? Shvetaketu says, I have not heard of any such thing, father. Please tell me what it is. Then Uddalak says, my son, look at this pot of clay. Would you call it more clay or more pot? Actually speaking, it is more clay than pot, because clay can remain over without pot. Pot cannot remain without clay. Clay is all that there is in that pot. The form was given, the name was given. There is nothing called pot apart from clay. So also there is nothing called a wave apart from water. There is nothing called an ornament apart from gold. So also there is nothing called you apart from consciousness. A name and form superimposed on consciousness is what you are calling you. So when you understand there is nothing called this pot apart from clay, it only appears to have a different separate identity because you are so identified only with name and form. In reality, it is not at all apart from clay. So then I can very well say the pot is an appearance of clay. I can say that, isn't it? So also the wave is an appearance of water. Ornament are appearances of gold. You are an appearance of consciousness. You are an appearance in consciousness also. And everything around us is like that. You see, what you are calling light, color. The color is nothing but an appearance of electromagnetic radiation. The appearance has become the reality because of our having invested the entire attention on name and form. You must remove name and form a bit and you will see the more basic substratum that constitutes that thing. So also consciousness is the fundamental principle of being. It is the basic substratum. Brahman is the basic substratum of this universe. Brahman is the reality that there is. Everything else is name and form superimposed on Brahman, to which we have given reality because we have invested so much attention in that name and form, which is only imposed upon Brahman. So please remember, just as pot is nothing apart from clay, you have nothing substantial in you apart from Brahman. You are Brahman, Tattvamasi Shvetaketu. You are verily that. Now Shvetaketu is all ears. It is about him, his reality. And he says, Father, tell me more about this. Then the father says, get that fruit of the Nyagrodha tree, the banyan tree, and then pound it down. So he gets some seeds and then pound the seeds further. Finally, there's nothing there. And the father says, look, my son, that which appears to you as nothing, that is the cause for this huge tree stretching over so far. So this is only possible because the potency of this lies in that seed, which is almost invisible to you. So also Brahman may not be visible to your senses, but it holds the potency to manifest this infinite, this huge universe, this vast universe. That is the seed of creation. And you didn't recognize that. And that verily thou art, O Shvetaketu, Tattvamasi. Like this it goes. There are a number of stories related here. Another bit I can give you is, he mixes a pinch of salt in water and asks Shvetaketu to taste that water on top, in the middle and at the bottom of the vessel. And Shvetaketu says it's all saline. Then Uddalak says, see, Brahman is mixed in his creation. Not that he got mixed up. It is he alone appearing as all of this. One reality appearing in so many names and forms. It is not visible, but if you taste it, you will know it. There is a way to taste it, and that is through self-knowledge. So, how Vedanta sees this third angle of reality. Reality is conceived as a triangle. The first angle is God. The second angle is the human soul, the Atman. The third angle is the world. So this third angle, Vedanta sees it as nothing but a manifestation of that same Brahman in different names and forms. So there appears to be so much difference in this world. It's a world of multiplicity, where everything appears different from the other. The essence is the same. So then this is actually the crux of values in Vedanta, this reality orientation. When you perceive one alone, the other person automatically becomes me in another form, me in another name, with another name. And this is actually you can say, an explanation to all the moral principles of this universe. There is only one reality, expressing in different names and forms. So how I treat you, I should treat you as I treat myself. If I hurt you, I'm only hurting myself. If I give you joy, I'm only giving joy to myself. Because you and I are essentially non-different. We share a common being. And the best expression of that common being is love and respect. This is where values originate, in the perception of reality. So this reality orientation is the way values are born. And Vedanta gives an explanation to this. Vivekananda clearly points out to this by saying the infinite oneness of the soul is the eternal sanction of all morality. So this is the understanding of the world in Vedanta. Finally, let us just sum up with one beautiful illustration from Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, have you seen a bale fruit? It's a fruit commonly found in India. It has 3 layers. There's an external crust, which is quite hard. And inside there are seeds. And there's the flesh. Now, the edible portion is only the flesh. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, although the edible portion is only the flesh, if you want the weight of the whole bale fruit, you have to take all these 3 portions into consideration. Then you get the weight of the bale fruit. But if you want the essence of the bale fruit, you will take only the flesh and discard the crust and the seeds. So if you want the essence of life, you will seek Brahman, the reality behind this life manifestation. And if you want the weight of merely, you just want to know about the whole fruit. You just want to understand this world of manifestation, then you will have to take every aspect of creation, the visible, the invisible, the manifest, the unmanifest, and see the weight. It is God alone manifested as all this. But you want the essence of life, the real taste of life, you must plunge into God, into Brahman. This is the ultimate message of the Vedanta in the words of Sri Ramakrishna. We will conclude this series with this talk. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Lord bless us with the knowledge of Vedanta. Peace, peace, peace.